Hello and welcome. You're watching France 24. I'm François Picard with Nadia Charby in the newsroom. Hello again, Nadia.
Hello again, François. In this next edition, we'll be talking to an economics professor about what it really means for France to lose its AAA credit rating.
And we're going to be waiting for confirmation of that imminent, some say. We'll also be talking in the world this week, our Friday panel of journalists, at the situation in Iran. It was a week that saw the president there effectively say he's going for broke. Why Assad's regime's digging in its heels despite mounting internal and external pressure. Plus, a fourth scientist killed in Tehran, and how Iran is getting set, by the way, to pull the plug on internet connection to the rest of the world. Also this hour,
Apple has broken a lot of customers' hearts. I think Apple has been very unkind, and a lot of us are very disappointed.
bitterness in Beijing after the cancellation of the local launch of the top-of-the-range iPhone 4S. Apple says there were simply too many people to open the shop safely. And in business, a credit downgrade for France, as you heard, and also a taxi strike for Italy. Marcus Carlson will have more on the new government's plans to liberalize that sector. That's coming up later. First, though, let's go straight to the newsroom. Nadia.
Thank you, François. These are the headlines this hour. It's the bullet France had hoped to dodge, but just like the US, just like Greece and Portugal, its all-important credit rating looks like it's about to be downgraded. Austria and Slovakia also in for some bad news. Did the Syrian regime have a hand in the death of French reporter Gilles Jacquier? France opens a murder probe into the journalist's killing during a government-organised trip to Homs this Wednesday. And activists, journalists, ethnic minority leaders, and a former prime minister. Burma frees hundreds of its most famous political prisoners and makes instant diplomatic gains. Ratings agency Standard & Poor's looks set to downgrade France and Austria's top-notch AAA credit rating this Friday. Slovakia, Portugal, Italy and Spain could also be up for a downgrade. However, S&P is expected to spare Germany, as well as Belgium, Luxembourg, Finland and the Netherlands. Now, that's all according to various media and government sources. Both S&P and the French presidency are so far refusing to confirm this, but in a telltale sign, the French finance minister has rushed to the president's side. So should we be bracing for a catastrophe? Well, let's ask economics professor and former IMF researcher Augustin Landier, who joins us now on the phone. Hello. Thank you for being with us. Now, this downgrade has been in the works for months now. We've been told repeatedly by specialists that the markets have already preempted it. Is this much ado about nothing?
You know, I mean, this is definitely going to be a game changer politically, because it's going to be difficult for the president of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, to make it look, as if France is still a player on par with Germany in the resolution of the fiscal crisis in Europe. But you're right that it's something that was announced and was pretty much predictable. So the opposite would have been really surprising in a sense.
And last month, S&P had threatened 15 of the Eurozone's 17 members with a possible mass downgrade. That's not what we're seeing. Most notably, Germany appears to be off the hook. So is it actually good news?
I mean, this was also expected, and it's just a confirmation of a situation that the markets have been aware of, at least since December. So, here again, I think that there is no catastrophe ahead. This was anticipated, and the precedent of what happened in the U.S. actually shows that the big, demand internationally for safe assets is very large, and actually those players are able to consider as safe assets that are not AAA assets formally. So there is no big change, I think, in the demand to be expected. One thing, though, to have in mind is that the way the ESF, the European Stability Fund, was set up is going probably to become dysfunctional in the next months. And so basically we are in a situation where the ECB is really the big stabilizer in Europe, not the ESF anymore, since it was basically set up at a time where we thought that France could keep its AAA.
Okay, Augustin Landier, thank you very much for your analysis. Disturbing. That's how the head of French public television describes the circumstances surrounding the death of 43-year-old reporter Gilles Jacquier in Homs on Wednesday. Comments that are fueling suspicions of regime collusion in the killing. And the come as French prosecutors open a murder inquiry. Mojaki's body was flown home this Friday morning for an autopsy to be carried out. The award-winning journalist died in a shelling attack in Homs, where he was taking part in a government-organised trip under military escort. Now, Burmese authorities are pushing forward with their efforts towards national reconciliation, with a major prisoner amnesty, the most significant to date, in fact. Among the hundreds of dissidents pardoned and released this Friday are a former prime minister, as well as a prominent student activist who spearheaded the failed uprising of 1988. And in a sign that these moves are bearing diplomatic fruit, the US has just announced plans to exchange ambassadors with Burma. Meanwhile, French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé will be visiting the country this weekend, and he'll bestow France's highest honour on opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Well, joining us now in the studio is our international affairs editor, Douglas Herbert. Douglas, hello.
Hello.
Now, we've seen international observers welcome these shifts and changes and concessions by the Burmese government with cautious optimism, let's say. The US does seem convinced. Is that a turning point?
You know what? We always have to greet any of these changes in a country like Burma with, like what you said, cautious optimism. Prudence, vigilance are sort of the marching orders. That said, it is hard to look at what's happening right there now and just sort of dismiss it as a lot of window dressing. Because, like you said, the political prisoner release that we're seeing today, part of a sweeping amnesty that's been sort of underway for months now, comes on top of big peace accord signed with some big ethnic minorities in the country, the opening of the media, loosening of media restrictions, allowing trade unions to be free. When you look at the political prisoners who were released, these are not just anyone. These are some of the most famous dissidents, activists this country has known. And they've been either under house arrest or detained for years. We have a former prime minister, Kim Nyunt. He was ousted by the junta, fell out of favor with them in 2004. And he's basically been under house arrest. I think it was a 44-year sentence that he was serving. So that's pretty big. You know, the top governor in the land. You had a former ethnic minority leader, the Shan ethnic minority, actually Thai-based, but they are, they have been some of the ones who've been in peace talks with the government. And the leader Kun Tun U was released, who's a big name in Burma. We probably have never heard of the person before. I admit I hadn't before today. And then also some of the legendary student leaders from the very famous 1988 generation, that student uprising where Aung San Suu Kyi first rose to prominence. So she's been released. He's been released. That was Min Ko Neng, big leader. Journalists, former military intelligence officials, they were also among the releasees.
OK, so let's stick to caution. How do you explain this shift?
Well, basically, they're looking for two things. This is pragmatic politics on the part of the regime. They may have taken off the uniform, but they still have their eye on retaining power. They want the sanctions lifted because a lot of countries, U.S., members of the EU, Canada, among those who have imposed very hard, tough economic sanctions on this country. It's potentially very rich, very vast resources. They want to exploit them. They need to get foreign investors back in. They're hoping that this sends a very strong signal to the West. We are ready to do business with you. We are trying to open up, and we are trying to follow a much more democratic way of life. That said, prudence, caution, vigilance. Human Rights Watch is saying, reminding us a lot of political prisoners still remain in jail.
OK, Douglas Herbert, thank you very much for that. Now, the two major unions leading a crippling national strike in Nigeria say they'll suspend their movement, but only for the weekend. The strike began after Nigeria's government ended a popular gas subsidy program, leading prices to double overnight and only adding to the burden of already skyrocketing transportation and food costs. While union leaders will be taking their case to Abuja, where talks with the government are scheduled for the next 2 days.
Promise of a 2-day lull after 5 days of protest. Two major unions in Nigeria say they will halt the general strike for the weekend, but pick it up again on Monday if conditions have not yet been met. Tens of thousands of protesters have hit the streets to protest the price of fuel in Africa's largest producer of crude oil. The government's decided to drop a key subsidy, which means petrol for the average Nigerian will double in cost to over 120 naira or €0.50 per litre.
Our mandate is that federal government reverts back to 65 naira, and then anything will follow. And our belief is that there must be a platform where you have a holistic look at the whole issue of subsidy.
The government says the subsidy fueled corruption and encouraged smuggling, and that cutting it would save the country over €6 billion.
What we have